Welcome to the Mentally Whole podcast. I am your host, Lauren Green. This podcast is a safe place for us to have weekly discussions about mental health, Christ, personal development, and the tools to live our best lives. Please stay tuned for a new episode. Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of the Mentally Whole podcast. I am your host, Lauren Green. So just a few housekeeping announcements. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and rate the podcast, because when you do that, I know that you are enjoying the content that I am giving out. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the mailing list. That link will be in the show notes. Also, I am changing the release dates of the episodes from Mondays to Wednesdays. I want to see how changing it to Wednesdays will affect the analytics, and I also want to see how I like recording the podcast on different days than what I'm doing now. So yeah, the episodes will now be released on Wednesdays. So we have a new segment. I found a name that I like for this new segment of the show. This segment is called Trending Topics, right? So our first trending topic is the August Alsina interview, which kind of went viral, and it's literally that clip of him saying that is everywhere. So if you don't know who August Alsina is, he's like a rapper / singer. He's from New Orleans. He had some really good songs back in like 2014, 2015. He did this hour-long interview with Angela Yee. He also recently released a documentary on his YouTube page, which I didn't know until I saw the interview. And in this interview, maybe no more than 10 minutes of this hour-long video, he says that he was in a relationship with Jada Pinkett Smith, and Will Smith gave his blessing. Literally, that was only 10 minutes of the interview. I wanted to watch the entire interview because everybody was just talking about this one part, and I really wanted to see, what else he was talking about in the interview. So in the interview, he talks about his illness that he has. He talks about the loss of his sister who died, I believe, from cancer, and now having the responsibility of taking care of his nieces. He talked about evolving, becoming a better person. He was very vulnerable. He was very vulnerable throughout the interview, and I admired his honesty and vulnerability. You can really tell that he really loved Jada, like the way he just spoke about her. You can tell that he really loved her. But my thoughts and prayers are with him because he is battling an illness. I think it's lupus or something along those lines. But he is in my prayers. Yeah. So the next trending topic is, once August Alsina released this interview, Jada said, she needs to come to the table and bring herself to the table. And I was like, okay, sis, let's see what's up. So Jada does the Red Table Talk. I believe it came out Thursday or Friday of last week. I don't even remember. And Will is there with her, and she goes on to talk about what happened between her and August. She didn't really go into full detail. The Red Table Talk was only like 12 minutes. And, she said her and Will were separated, and they were kind of through with each other. They were on the road to divorce, and her words were, she got into an entanglement with August. So I'm guessing that means affair or relationship. And she also said her and Will made a joke like bad marriage for life, ha ha ha. I don't really like that they said that, because it kind of, you speak, the power of the tongue is the power of life, and death is in the power of the tongue. Sorry, y'all, had to get it together. Life and death is in the power of the tongue. And yeah, they were joking around, and yeah, it's a reference, kind of like a play on Bad Boys for Life, but your words matter in life. So yeah, it was cute, but I didn't really think it was that cute because that's not something to joke about. And we don't honestly know what other marital problems they have. And just like August, Jada and Will are in my thoughts. I really honestly only think Jada did that interview because Black Twitter was really going in about what August said, to be honest with you. That's one of the reasons why I only think they did that interview, because of Black Twitter. So shout out to Black Twitter and for being amazing. So we are going to put a pin in the trending topics and we are going to get into the discussion of the day. So for this episode, we are talking about integrity, right? And we're talking about personal / self integrity. So you might ask, what is integrity? Integrity, I Googled it. I just Googled what that meant, and it means the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles and moral uprightness. Synonyms or similar words are honesty, honor, sincerity, and truthfulness. So the first question that comes to mind for me is, are you honest with yourself? Right? I looked up a couple articles about personal integrity, and this quote stands out the most. I'm going to leave the article in the show notes, and it says, being honest with yourself is having the strength to recognize the real reason behind why you aren't making progress, right? What are you being honest with yourself? Are you being truthful with yourself? Are you honoring yourself, right? And so I have a few tips that'll help you with personal integrity. So the first tip is know your weaknesses and study them. Learn how to overcome them. My apostle says this all the time, that you need to know your weaknesses and study them and learn how to get better at what you're weak at, right? It's no point to study your strengths because you're already good at those, right? It's important that you study your weaknesses. Like if you have issues with public speaking, okay, figure out how to get better at public speaking. If you're bad at organizing, learn how to organize. Like learn your weaknesses and study them. Number 2, give yourself the gift of follow through. This is a big one. This probably should have been number 1, but follow through with the promises that you make for yourself, right? It seems simple, but not really. During this pandemic, I've learned the importance of showing up for myself. So for example, one night I did not feel like writing in my journal, and so the first sentence I wrote was like, here I am showing up for myself. Literally, that was the first sentence. And after I wrote it, it dawned on me like, yeah, even though I don't want to do it, I'm still showing up for myself. Like I didn't talk myself out of not writing in my journal, because sometimes in life we say we're going to do something and then we make excuses and talk ourselves out of it, right? Like, oh, I don't have enough time, or oh, nobody's going to be there with me, or oh, whatever you say to yourself. But yeah, you talk yourself out of following through with your own commitments. And the thing about number 2 is that we follow through and we show up for everybody else, but sometimes we forget to show up for ourselves, right? I had saw this Facebook post by D. Jamison Wilford, and I'm going to read it to you guys because it blessed me, but it talks about integrity. So in this on her post, it says, question, who's going to show up for you this week? Think of the person, place, or thing in your life that you go the hardest for. Think of how much they have benefited from your diligence, love, sacrifice, and commitment, even if it has not been appreciated. Now think of how much better you'd be if you had a you in your life and on your team. Really think about it. What if I told you that you do have a you on your team? It is you that you've been waiting for, and you have what it takes to invest in you and love yourself more than anyone else ever will. This Monday, let's kill the narrative that it is easier to be everything and more to/for others, yet it is the hardest thing in the world to show up for ourselves. Begin with mindfulness, and from there commit to remembering you in small ways. To answer the question at the top, who's going to show up for you this week? The answer is you. So y'all, I'm gonna leave that in the show notes because it blessed me some kind of good. But yes, I feel like, we make it a point to show up for our friends, make it a point to show up for our families. And sometimes deep down inside, we're struggling or we're tired, So it's important to show up for yourself, even if it's 30 minutes a day where you do something for yourself. Right? Right. Tip number 3, think before you commit. This is important because sometimes we say yes, 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 and we become stretched too thin, right? We're stretched in all these different places because we said yes to 5,000 things, right? Think before you commit. Make sure you have time for these commitments. Make sure that you are able to fully be present for the things that you commit to. Tip number 4, learn to say no. Learn your boundaries, boo. Learn your boundaries, sis. Okay? The only way we're going to succeed in life is knowing our boundaries, knowing our limits, right? If you know good and well you can't walk 1 mile a day, sis, then don't say yes to doing a challenge. Don't sign up for all these challenges and you don't have time for it. You know what I'm saying? Be mindful of the things that you say yes and no to. All right? Learn to say no. No is not a bad word. No is not a curse word. Tip number 5. This is the last one. Reflect on your growth and progress. Reflect on how far you've come. Reflect on the goals that you've made. And remind yourself, like, hey, I used to be at point A at one point, and now I'm all the way over here at point C. You know what I'm saying? Remind yourself of your growth and progress. Also, remind yourself of your goals, right? Because sometimes you might need to revise your goals or rework them, or you might need to set new goals because the goals that you have might be too easy. You might need a challenge, right? So y'all, I hope you learned a lot about personal integrity in this episode. I hope these tips bless you, because when I was researching, like I always do, this episode really did, the research for this episode really did bless me, okay? Like, I am just trying to show up for myself all the rest of 2020. Like, show up for me, before I show up for anybody else. Show up for me and my commitments that I made, y'all. I even went out and made me a calendar, right? There are some things I want to do with the podcast, and if I'm not organized, it's not going to happen, right? I'm not going to be as successful if I'm not organized, right? So I showed up for myself. I made a calendar, and I'm ready to take the world by storm. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode again, and I will see you guys next week.